Derek, welcome back to the jungle.
3, 2, 1.
This is The Jungle, an up-close, unvarnished look inside leadership and business strategy. We wade into the real-world leader's face and explore what they do to create a path forward, because that's what business is. Wild, exciting.
It's the jungle.
Derek, it was great to finally see you this last weekend in person.
Yeah. First, welcome back to the jungle, the podcast. And yes, in Michigan, we've opened up some things, some state orders lifted. We were able to get in small groups now and have some gatherings, social distance in those gatherings, but it was great to finally see you in person, have some conversations in person. Stacy and Kristen got to see each other, which is nice. They miss each other. Kids all got to see each other and play. And what I miss most is we got to have some of Doug's elite cooking. You were an elite cook, and even though we had plant-based burgers and salad and stuff, I felt like I was eating at a 5-star restaurant, as always when we go to your house. So if you're ever in town, go eat at Doug's house. He'll cook you a meal. It is really, really, really good food. So it was enjoyable to see you.
Well, it was, I love cooking, and we had some great plant-based burgers, and you take those to the next level with a little bit of special sauce, a little bit of caramelized onion on there. You got to toast the bun, and it makes a world of difference. So it was great to get everybody together finally after a long time. Speaking of food, we had a phenomenal guest this week. So actually a few weeks ago. So we recorded this episode on the week of May 25th. So this was before all of the events unfolded around race and protests and really looking at some changes in our society that are needed. And so this conversation that we had was exclusively focused on COVID, and we had the great honor of having Steve Cahillane, who is the CEO and also chairman of the board at Kellogg's. And Steve is a phenomenal leader with a great background. He was previously president and CEO at Nature's Bounty. And prior to that, spent 7 years with the Coca-Cola Company, where he was most recently the president of Coca-Cola Americas. This guy knows his way around CPG, retail, food, beverages, a great guy, really good guest. What were your takeaways from that conversation, Derek?
So second, all that, great guy, really good guest, really humble person. And I'm going to go straight to an amazing story I heard that inspired me. He had, and listened to the podcast because it's great, but he picked up the phone and called one of his customers that was, had a great story about some of their products. I'm not going to spoil any of that, but so the takeaway here is, hey, we've had previous guests talk about bring a customer to a meeting and let your employees experience a day in the customer's life through that meeting. The other side of this,
that was Kevin Lobo.
That was Kevin, yep. Stryker CEO. Yeah, we've had some great guests.
Yep.
The other side of that is, so this one is even simpler. Let's just pick up the phone and call your customers, have an honest conversation about them, not a sales conversation, but just get to know them a little bit on a personal level. Super simple, takes a little bit of time. He says he tries to answer all the emails and letters he gets from everybody, but it's a really easy thing for people to do. And you don't have to be a CEO to do it. You can just be anybody and just have a personal conversation. And what better time to do that now than to get to know your customers on a personal level to serve them better. So great takeaway. What'd you have, Doug?
So similar idea was around communication. He had the phrase, keep your ear to the ground and really understand what is going on out there with your customers. And this one was actually on your employees. So he focused on 3 specific things he does when he's calling his employees. Once the crisis hit around COVID, he calls them up and he says, thank you for what you're doing. He says, what do you need? What are the resources that you need to get your job done? And providing a word of encouragement. Simple act, personal touch, really needed during these difficult times. We've got crises now on top of one another, and I think that personal touch really matters. If we're hoping that all these Kellogg employees are really going to enjoy this podcast. But this is I don't even know. This might be this is number 12, number 13. I've lost track.
I think we're up to 15, 16 now, Doug, for these episodes. Yeah.
Are we? So if you're looking for content of how great leaders are managing and leading through crisis and thinking about strategy through crisis, check out our podcast. We've got some phenomenal guests there. Patty Poppy, CEO of Consumers Energy, Kevin Lobo, CEO of Stryker, our own President Montgomery, former car czar here at Western. So make sure you go check out the podcast, The Jungle, on your favorite podcast app. Once you subscribe, give us 5 stars. That'll help the podcast. We most appreciate that. And then if you're interested in more content, follow us on LinkedIn, on our LinkedIn page, the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy. Gosh knows, if you're leading an organization right now, you need help thinking it through. And what better way than to hear from some great executives?
I'll extend that. If you're leading anything right now, any group of people, individuals, and you need some great tips and to learn from some of the best, have a listen to some of our series. They are really, really good and some really good takeaways.
So with that, we hope everybody enjoys Steve Cahillane. The Jungle is produced by the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy in Western Michigan University's Hayworth College of Business. Our center supports the leadership and business strategy major, conducts large-scale consulting projects, and trains professionals in acquiring and operating small businesses. To learn more, visit wmich.edu/leadership center. Steve, welcome to the Jungle. Do you have a beverage with you?
I do. I have a Spindrift lemon with me right now.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Spindrift
Cheers.
lemon. What do you have today, Derek?
I have green tea again, Doug. Still on the green tea trend.
It's summertime here in Michigan, so I'm on to Arnold Palmer's. Some good tea and lemonade, maybe the greatest drink ever created. Steve, really appreciate you taking time to speak with us and share some of your experience really leading through this really difficult crisis at Kellogg. First, I want to start off, where are you right now? Tell us a little bit about where you're at.
Well, physically right now, I'm at our home in Lincoln Park, Chicago, and I'm been splitting time during this whole thing between Battle Creek, where I have an apartment, our office there, but I haven't been on an airplane since mid-February. So it's just the highway between Battle Creek and Chicago.
Excellent. We spent some time, my wife and I, up in Chicago. Lincoln Park is a great area to be, I guess, stuck in a pandemic. You got great delivery probably around you. Do you have any new routines that you're doing these days? New exercise, new food during the crisis?
I would say we're much like everybody. It's, things that we were doing at home, we're doing more of. I've always been very into physical fitness. I'm getting more miles on the road. There's no question about that. And as a family, we're hunkered down together. So, we've kind of re-engaged with board games and things like that. So, the positive's been more family time and more fitness.
Are you winning?
What's the family board game? I got to ask that one because we're into board games right now, huge as my kids too. What's the favorite?
The family favorite seems to be Clue, believe it or not. So, kind of an oldie but a goodie.
Are you winning any? Are you winning any of those games, Steve? Let's be honest.
A couple here and there, but my kids are actually, they're pretty relentless when it comes to strategizing. So, few and far between, I guess, to be honest.
Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, the exercise thing is actually kind of nice. I feel like you actually have the bandwidth to do that during the crisis. Gives you that opportunity. So let's start off with some questions. Take us a little bit behind the scenes. What has the experience been like for you leading through this crisis in the last few weeks?
Yeah, so I'd start by saying we're very fortunate because we're an essential business. We provide food, obviously. So, we take that very seriously. And the other end of the continuum, if you're in the travel or leisure business, obviously it's a far different thing. And so for us, we really focused on 3 priorities from the very beginning: keeping our people safe, because our people are continuing to go to work in our factories and our distribution centers. And so keeping them safe was of paramount importance. And then the second priority was, providing food for the world in a time when it needs it the most. People are eating at home, and we're very focused on foods that, people consume very much at home. And the third is giving back to our communities. And so, those three priorities have really helped us, kind of guide the way for our people, and they work symbiotically together. Our plants have been running 24/7, virtually setting production records all around, the world. And they're doing that because people are showing up. Absenteeism is actually down. And they're showing up because they recognize that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. And they're inspired by, the role that they're playing in this pandemic and providing food. And they're encouraged by watching their company give back to communities. So they really work symbiotically together. And I couldn't be more proud of our people and the way that they're showing up and the way they're meeting the moment.
So can you take us a little bit behind the scenes into your day-to-day and your routines? Now you've got you've always had this purpose, but it's become so much more important about providing the world food, right? And you went to the grocery stores early on, they were getting emptied. So as a leader, what are some of the things you're doing specifically that are helping drive that purpose forward and helping you set production records, which sounds crazy, but.
I think the most important thing, and it sounds so simple, but it's vital, and it's communication. And so, we have been in regular communication with all of our people. I started literally in the first week of this pandemic. I called every single one of our plant managers personally, just picked up the phone and called them around the world to thank them for what they were doing, to make sure that they had everything that they needed. Not that, I needed to do that, but, I wanted to do it, and provide encouragement and, let them know that, we were there, and whatever they needed, we would be there. And, that's continued. We've had more global town halls, with half the time just sharing whatever information we have, and then half the time taking questions from around the world. And, that's been really important because you have to really keep your, keep your ear to the ground in moments like this, because things are changing, literally every day. And so, I start my day every day with my leadership team on a call where we just walk around the globe and see what's going on, what's happened, what's changed in the last 24 hours, what have we learned in the last 24 hours that can be shared quickly around the globe. And so it's been fast moving, but it's really about communication, listening, understanding exactly what's happening, what's vital, and then providing encouragement and making sure that the learning is spread very, very quickly around the world.
Steve, let's dive into that one a little bit. So what are you finding effective in terms of communication during this crisis when you're remote? And let's get super tactical. Are you going to text more? Are you on Microsoft Teams or Slack? What are you finding effective in dealing with the rapidly moving environment in terms of specific tactics on communication?
Yeah, and you raised a couple. I think, text is really important because people know, at least for me and my leadership team, text is a way to quickly get a message across. You see something come across and you realize it's probably a little bit more urgent than, say, an email. The other thing is, we're losing the face-to-face connections in so many ways. For our business, obviously based in Battle Creek, our headquarters is there. I see people up and down the escalator all the time, and that's just not happening. It's a virtual world. So we're a Skype company, and, I always have my video on, right? And so, all these calls that I've been talking about doing in these global town halls, the video's on, and wherever I am, whether it's in Battle Creek or Chicago, I want to make sure that, we're making that personal connection. So we're leveraging technology very much. And the two biggest are Skype, video calls, text, and the old-fashioned phone call as well. I just say, look, give me a call. If I'm in a meeting, I won't answer, but I'll see that you called and I'll call you back.
It's funny because sometimes it's the point where people forget about the phone. They're like, let's do a Zoom. And you're like, hey, phone works great too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about your culture there at Kellogg. It's a fantastic company, really well known around the world, and obviously here in West Michigan. What have you seen as a leader in terms of building your employees, supporting your culture as a way to help you get through this time?
Yeah, we're blessed to have a culture that is very strong. A company that's over 100 years old, started by Mr. Kellogg, who then gave away all his wealth to create the Kellogg Foundation. And, we talk about our company having a heart and soul, and we mean it. It's really, truly inspirational inside the company. And so, we went into this with a very strong culture. But I can tell you the way that the company is meeting the moment, and by that I mean our people, meeting the moment and providing food at elevated demands, the likes of which we never thought we would see, I think is strengthening our culture. And so, I talked about the town halls and all the communications we're doing, and we ask for and elicit feedback after, a lot of these interactions, and the type of positive feedback we're getting, where 98, 99, 100% of all employees are saying that, they're proud of the company. They're proud of the way that we are managing through this pandemic. They're inspired by what we're doing. They're inspired by their colleagues, the frontline workers who are showing up each and every day to the plants, to the distribution centers, who are out in the stores. We're celebrating that, and it's building on the culture, and people are just really proud to be a part of this.
When I want to build on this, I'll jump it over to Derek. We asked for questions from folks affiliated here with Kellogg, employees, students. One of the questions or ideas I got was to ask you to speak a little bit about an elderly gentleman who talked about cornflakes saving his life. And they said it was such an inspirational story that the world needed to see. And so I wanted to ask you to maybe tell a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so, I read every letter that's addressed to me that comes to the company. And I got this letter, and it was handwritten, and it was several pages long. And it was from a gentleman in Florida who'd served in the U.S. Navy and then became a New York City police officer and had since retired down in Florida. And he talked about a moment where he was in, a health crisis, and he was in a health facility, and he didn't like the breakfast he was being served. Kellogg's cornflakes was part of his everyday routine, and he asked if they would switch to Kellogg's cornflakes, and they did. And he credited us with really saving his life in some ways, and improving his health. And he ended the letter with his signature, his name, and a telephone number, not an email, but a telephone number, which I suspect was probably a landline. And so this was like late on a Friday, and I thought, I'm gonna call him. And so I called him, and sure enough, he answered, and I said who I was, and we had a great conversation. My father-in-law were Navy veterans. My own father was a New York City fireman, and so we had a lot in common and a lot to talk about. And I just loved the conversation. I was inspired by it. He's a great storyteller, great guy. And so we hung up and didn't think much about it. Went about the rest of the afternoon. And then I received an email from the gentleman's son. And the email said, in essence, sorry to intrude. I'm sure you're busy, but if you could clear something up. My father thinks he talked to the CEO of Kellogg, and it could be a fishing expedition or something like that. Could you please clear up that you did in fact talk to my dad? And I emailed him back, and I said, no, actually, I did call your dad, and we had a great conversation. And he's obviously a great guy, and I appreciate you're looking after him and so forth. And I really hope that I didn't disrupt, life in any way, and apologize if I did. And he got back to me right away and said, absolutely not. You've just given him another great story, another chapter in what is an otherwise great story. And so I shared that with, our team during one of the town halls, and, people, liked the story. And I said, if you're wondering why I made the call, it's because we're Kellogg, and that's what we do.
That's a great story. Wow. So you mentioned something, you slipped in there. You said you've elevated demand to likes you've probably never seen before. Are you seeing, strategically now, massive consumer trends or shifts in buying behavior and habits that, because of COVID and even pre-COVID, there's always trends around health and things like that. Are you guys seeing that at Kellogg, and how are you adjusting to some of that?
Yeah, so we are seeing that. And, I talked about the 3 priorities that we implemented as soon as the pandemic started. And quickly, we added a 4th priority, and that was figuring out what this new normal is and is going to be, which is what everybody's trying to figure out. And so what we're seeing is obviously this incredible elevated demand because people have to stay at home. Now, the new normal is going to be when they don't have to stay at home anymore, the things that they had to do because of the environment, some of those they'll want to stop doing. And others that they've kind of reappraised, they'll want to keep doing. And so what they're telling us, what consumers tell you, is always very different than the way they actually behave. And so we're getting a lot of information about what consumers are saying they're likely to do when things return to a more normal environment. But in fact, what they actually will do is what everybody's trying to figure out. And of course, we're trying to seize the moment and say, okay, if you've reappraised cereal and understand how convenient it is, how economical it is, how wonderful it is to sit with the family and have breakfast together, how do we make that part of a compelling moment going forward when you don't have to do it anymore? And so what I tell you is, in essence, people are behaving in ways that are obviously different because of the crisis. But as we slowly emerge into this new normal, there's going to be a lot of lasting changes, and what they are, nobody knows. It'll unfold in front of us, and we want to, create the environment where we can be successful in that new moment. And we're, as I said, one of the lucky ones in terms of, people buying our foods, relying on our foods at this moment. And it's incumbent upon us as a business to seize that moment and hang on to those new consumers. And reward those newly loyal, more loyal consumers as we go forward.
That's an interesting. We were talking about as we prepped for this conversation. What breakfast eating habits are being disrupted, and what will be like going forward. And I would be curious, as a consumer thinks about convenience and speed, maybe of a cereal or a breakfast bar versus and I've got time, maybe I'll go towards a cooked breakfast. Are you guys getting any kind of preliminary signals of how customers are starting to react around breakfast choices right now?
Yeah, and so our breakfast cereals and our Eggo frozen waffle business are seeing very highly elevated demands, and you can see that in the syndicated data. But you're also seeing, a lot of from scratch ingredients that are very high up in kind of demand elevation, as well as people are. They're preparing their own meals, right? And so there's been a across the board increase in what we would call at-home eating. And again, it's because people have to do that. What we have seen over the course of, the last several weeks and months is, people are not time starved, but we're seeing indications that they don't actually want to spend an hour, making a meal and then a half an hour cleaning up after a meal on a regular basis. It's
I'm in on that one.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, I think they're striking a balance between the joy of doing that with the family, but also the convenience of, more ready to eat options. And, they're finding their way through this, and it's kind of coming to a little bit of an equilibrium right now.
I would put myself in that bucket of the constant cleaning up, and the reason to go towards a waffle type solution, which I just credit my son for increasing your entire demand, because he's just been going through the Eggo waffles like crazy lately.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. So I know you said, hey, no one knows what the new normal is going to be like. There's a lot of hypotheses. Do you have any on some of the trends that are likely here to stay? And it may not be just around cereal, but how people are getting your product. I know, like for my family, we are ordering all of our groceries online now, and I don't think we'll go back, although I'm not sure. Can't predict that. Any of those trends, and how are you reacting to them as you and your company?
Yeah, so there's been a number of things, and I'll start with the one you hit on, which is clearly seen demand accelerate, and that's direct to your home through any kind of provider is obviously a great way to get your groceries in this moment. You don't have to go out. You don't have to put yourself at any kind of risk. And people are having generally positive experiences. And so we think that that's probably moved this evolution forward by a couple of years, because there's all these new users. Now, some of those will go quickly back to the environment. Others will go more slowly back to a brick and mortar environment, because there's obviously real benefits to that as well. People like walking, through produce sections and, all the things that retailtainment can bring and so forth. So it's hard to predict exactly what will happen, but clearly there have been a host of new cohorts who have discovered that lots of things can be delivered direct to their door, and they'll hang on to the convenience of that, and that will become part of whatever the new normal may be. And so again, hard to predict, but we're making sure that we can win in any environment. We've always had a very big e-commerce kind of focus, and that obviously continues. How we can bring our brands to life in a more virtual environment has been something we've been working on. And so that I think will be one of the elements that continues as we go forward. The other, if you think about the shopping trips that people are making, it's a bit of, you hear funny stories about families saying, okay, it's kind of like the SWAT team. We got to get in the store. We got to get out of the store, minimal contact with any individuals. And, they want brands that they can trust. They want brands that are in stock. And, so big trusted brands are doing very well. And, again, people are trying things that they haven't tried in quite a period of time. They're remembering old favorites. And so we think a lot of that will have lasting impact. But we'll just have to wait and see. And again, it's incumbent upon us to make the most of the moment and provide the best possible experience for our consumers as they're reappraising and enjoying our brands.
So let's talk a little bit about making the best of the moment. And I'd be curious what lessons you'd want to share around this, which is the question around playing offense, playing defense right now. And it seemed like we went through a period of time with the crisis. It was a lot of cost cutting, liquidity focused. And now we're moving into almost, it feels like a new phase where it's the new normal and starting to think about where are we placing bets, where are we going to go on offense? How do you as a leader from a strategy point of view start to think about being aggressive, being more offensive, or waiting during this where everything's a little bit uncertain? How do you think about that? What lessons would you give?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to ground yourself on, what your company's purpose is and, what you're meant to do. And so for us right now, our whole purpose is, almost perfectly situated to meeting the moment. People need food and they need food that they can trust. And that's why, our plants operating at 24/7 and doing everything required is, something that's inspiring the company from within. But you also have to put the consumer at the heart and soul of everything. And the consumer right now is under a tremendous amount of stress everywhere around the world. And if you just take the United States, we're seeing unemployment numbers that are shocking. And nobody could have ever predicted that we would be in this type of environment. And we're going to see a recessionary period that nobody knows how long it will last, and nobody knows yet how deep it will be. But it's going to create a lot of tension and a lot of stress in consumers. And so, how we think about meeting the moment and how we think about taking the company forward has got to take that into consideration, because empathy is more important than it's ever been. Providing food at affordable prices that can help families as they need it is really very important. And so I think keeping your value system intact, understanding your purpose, and seizing the moment in the right way is really important, because everything communicates. And inside your company, you want morale to be high, you want people to be inspired, and they need to see that the company is doing things the right way and keeping their consumer and their customer kind of at the heart of everything that they do. And I think, that's important. And so taking a long-term view about who your company is, who it's meant to be, and who you want it to be, what you want it to be going forward, are all really important things to ask yourself, have your leadership team ask, and hold ourselves accountable for being the type of company that, we want to be.
That's great. Do you have one more question before I go audience question rapid fire?
I think you should go audience rapid fire. That's pretty good. You want to be careful of everyone's time. So
we got questions from our listeners, from our audience, and that they wanted to hear you answer. And this question actually comes from one of our great students here in the Hayworth College of Business, Jonathan Lockhart. He's a leadership and business strategy major and marketing major, and he also works at Kellogg. And so his question was, any insights that you can provide and lessons you could share about how you pivoted this kind of the sales reps from stores and all those employees and then went remote. What's the lesson you want to share on leadership from that pivot that you guys did?
It's a great question. And the lesson is it's almost anything is possible. Because if you had told me that for whatever reason, a couple of months ago, we would have to throw everybody into their different environment, a home environment, and you would close a quarter, you would prepare year-end shareholder meetings, you would prepare your results, you would call on your customers, you'd produce your food, and you'd continue to operate while nobody was in the office. Sales reps were working from home. I wouldn't have believed it. I'd say that's just not possible. You'd have to have months of testing. You'd have to make sure the systems were in place. You'd have to go through all sorts of drills. And it's amazing, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And we're not alone in that. But what people are able to do when faced with really difficult circumstances and how they can rise to the occasion should never, ever be underestimated. And I, for one, will never underestimate it again, because I've just been amazed by the fortitude of, our people, the creativity of them, and the way that this whole thing has worked has been nothing short of inspirational.
It is. Yeah, it's great. There's so many upsides to this, and I think it's difficult. This time is difficult, and there's so many challenges and hardship. But there are silver linings, and there are good things that really can come from this. And hearing how your employees are being resourceful, I think maybe showcases what what's possible, right, and what you can do. So we'd love to conclude here with some rapid fire questions. These are kind of one-word answers. Are you ready to go?
Ready to go.
All right. Favorite leader?
Winston Churchill.
Courage or compassion?
Both.
First one to not.
First one. Okay. How about this one? Speed or accuracy?
Speed with as much accuracy as possible.
Okay. Great ideas or great execution?
Great execution built on really good ideas.
Steve's breaking the rules. He's
all over the place.
He's the first rule breaker. Okay. A word to describe your leadership style?
Shoulder to shoulder.
Are you a night owl or an early bird?
Early bird.
So this is a kind of building off our podcast name, which is The Jungle, which comes from a great Ray Dalio quote for all you listeners out there around, you can live a great life if you want to take the choice to go through a dangerous jungle. So this question is if you had a dangerous jungle that you had to go through a difficult task in business and that was facing you, who do you take with you?
I think my leadership team.
And then do you have if you're going to face a dangerous jungle, Steve, what's the product that you're going to take with you?
Frosted Flakes.
And if you had an animal,
Tony the tiger would be with me, and who's more ferocious than Tony?
Absolutely. And then if you had an animal that really captures and embodies your leadership, Steve, what's your animal?
Tiger.
That was a give.
That was a layup. That was a layup. All right.
You know how many guests we've had that have paused on that question and thought. You said Tony the Tiger for the previous answer. I'm like,
Steve was dialed. Yes.
And cheated on all the rapid fire questions.
Well, that showcases maybe a little bit about Steve. Steve is he doesn't like the trade-offs. He's a both and kind of guy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Jungle, the podcast. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Great being with you guys. Thanks.